Oh, blimey, I did it again, didn't I? I hit the wrong button at the wrong time. Oh, we'll get used to this eventually. I know we'll sometime. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. I've got an update for you tonight, and I've got a guest in, and we're going to be talking about suicide again. Just in case you're new to the channel, I do a live awesome quiz every Tuesday, and that goes live at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time, as we're in now. This show is all about talking about mental health and taking the stigma out of it. Because there's nothing on the telly, you might as well stick with us for the evening. We're on for about an hour, and we're coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. So, Lord Heale of Heale Manor, I'm your host for this evening. If you're feeling particularly generous, you could always buy me a coffee. It's not compulsory. However, what is compulsory is, if it's your first time here, subscribe to the channel. It's free. Something for nothing. And there's things about giving the old like button a click, and also the bell icon. If you get the old bell icon at Dewberry, and I'll say all, it notify you when I go live. So there you go. That's how it should work anyway. So, what we got coming up? A little while ago, I had a guest on, and his name is Scott, and he's got a daughter, Grace. Grace had Down syndrome, and during lockdown, she went into hospital, and she didn't come out, and basically she died through negligence of the hospital. So, Scott, we did a little bit of recording. He can't make it tonight, so we did a little recording a couple of days ago to give us an update on where they are now. So sit back and have a watch of Scott giving us an update on where they are. Welcome back. Scott, welcome back. We had a chat a little while ago, and you were telling us what happened with your daughter, Grace, and I believe you've got an update for us now. So how far forward are we?
Yeah, so Grace's last day on Earth was October 13th of 21. Grace was 19. She had Down syndrome. She was taken out by a larger agenda. I'm calling it the euthanasia agenda, and she was given a drug combination on her last day that nobody could have survived, with Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine in a 29-minute window. And on top of that, the doctor put an illegal do not resuscitate order on her. So what's happened is I've been speaking out on that topic for over a year now. I've been on over 400 shows, and I'm at the point, or I shouldn't say I mean, our family is at the point where we've been working with attorneys for about 6 months. And last week, Thursday, we started the lawsuit process. And, this is the first of its kind. It's a landmark case because of a lot of reasons. One is, there's so many roadblocks to filing, which, if you want to go through those, we can. And, then on top of that, outside of the roadblocks to file, you also have to realize that you've got to, somehow you got to fund the case. So virtually nobody's filed. So our filing is not only against the hospital system, but it's also against the individual doctors and nurses. And the reason is because those individual doctors and nurses cannot use the excuse that they're following the hospital orders or whatever. I mean, they still chose. And we're hoping by having them be defendants in the lawsuit that other doctors and nurses will see they're going to be held accountable for their actions and stop the behavior.
Yeah. It's outrageous what happened to Grace. Really is. And it just shouldn't have happened.
Correct.
So you're now at the stage of going forward with the lawsuit, how have you been able to fund it? Are you crowdfunding something like that, or um,
Well, thankfully, we were financially blessed and we had set things up to take care of Grace after we were dead. So, I mean, that was our plan. Obviously, God had
mm,
other plans. And so, we're able to fund it on our own. And that's a significant problem when people have loved ones who die. They don't have $300,000 sitting around to fund cases, and
mm,
that's the reality of what it takes. So um, it's a no-brainer to do it because we're trying to save people's lives. That's why we're in this fight. And I don't put any faith in a lawsuit, yet it's a tool.
yeah,
So it's a tool to expose evil, and so um, for us it was it wasn't even a decision. It's not, I was going to say it's an easy decision, but I mean it's just
mm,
automatic. You got to do it
yeah,
because of the goal to save. We're trying to save people's lives here.
yeah. I mean, you've lost Grace, but we don't want to lose anybody else through that same sort of negligence.
Correct.
And what you're doing is terrific, I think. Um,
Well,
and
thanks for that, Tim. I mean, God is leading the charge. He keeps opening up doors. It's amazing. When we jumped in this fight, we promised that we would walk through the doors that He opened, and it's been quite a walk. I mean, it's tough to walk this walk, but
yeah,
He's been faithful, and the details that He's involved in. It's really neat to be along for the ride.
yeah. And I guess what makes it a little bit more difficult is that you have to relive it all the time until it's settled. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
reliving it
tough
is
in
no
itself.
fun.
No.
God gave me the ability to compartmentalize the story when I'm on the air, and thankfully He did that. When you start thinking about things on your own, when I spent a lot of time alone, and
Mm,
when you start thinking about things alone, you go on a walk, and it's I miss her. uh,
yeah.
you remember a lot of the fun times, and then you can laugh, but I mean, the laughter is quickly followed by tears. And Grace was, she was so funny. Just, people ask, what do you miss most? Well, I mean, from I miss her hugs, of course, the most.
Yeah.
But what I really miss is, um, she was one of the few that picked up on and got my sense of humor, and so her and I bantered things around together. It was a blast. So
Mm,
she got. And she would give people zingers when they're not, they just think, well, this is a Down syndrome kid, she doesn't know anything, but she was smart. So when she was 18, I took her to get her ID so she could vote. Well, then the next thing we did, we went to the local credit union where my wife and I have an account, and we set up a bank account for her. So we're in the branch manager's office, so we get the checking account all set up, and then the branch manager asked Grace, "Would you like her to have a credit card?" And so then Grace said, "Well, of course." So she said, "Well, what would you like the limit to be?" And Grace said 30. She said 30, and the branch manager says $30, and Grace said, "No, 30,000." Yeah. Yeah.
got some big
She,
plans for spending then.
yeah, that's right. And plus she knew Dad's going to take care of the bill. She was a sharp kid.
Terrific.
So
So will you keep us up to date as how you progress with the case?
yeah, so I want to share first what type of hurdles people have in order to file, and then we'll just talk about what happens next. So,
Yeah.
just to be able to file, the cabal has set up numerous roadblocks that have been set up way before COVID. Of course, COVID has the PrEP Act in the United States that's a shield. But before that, so you just lost your daughter. So you'd think, well, I mean, you can you can sue for, loss of companionship, wrongful death, and various angles. I mean, you would think this is logical. Well, you start reviewing
Mm.
the statutes and you see we don't have a claim because Grace was an adult. Grace was 19. So
Yeah.
then we had to open up an estate for Grace just to file a claim. Then you realize, well, there's no money in it. So, when you hire an attorney, and attorneys, people are thinking, well, they're going to get, 1/3 of the proceeds. Well, there's no proceeds. So what are they
Yeah.
going to get 1/3 of? So then all of a sudden you realize, okay, well, the only way these cases are going to file is if you have one of two things: either an attorney who's won the lottery, so they don't need to be paid, so they're willing to take on a case pro bono, or you're funding your own case. I mean, those are the two choices. So
Mm.
because you can't be banking on the proceeds coming from the case. And then maybe the worst thing of all is, I'll tell you a story. Early on, after Grace died, I talked with several attorneys, and they all rejected the case. Um, and then I was able to find out why, because I talked with an attorney that was in a big firm, and he referred me to the best medical malpractice attorney in our state. I talked with him and gave him the details of Grace's situation, and he said, Scott, even in slam dunk cases like this appears to be, you only have a 1 in 10 chance of winning. I said, well, I don't get it. What do you mean? And so he said, I'll share a story with you. I had a case where a doctor sewed up a sponge inside of the patient, and we lost. I said, well, how is that possible? And he said, well, I brought in 10 expert witnesses, and the defense brought in 100. So he told me they circle the wagons around their own.
Mm.
They're bigger than us. So we're going up against a huge hospital system. They have $30 billion in cash reserves. So, I mean, it's David versus Goliath. So these
Yeah.
are all the things that really prevent you from seeking justice. And this was set up on purpose because they need the medical system to cooperate in this whole agenda. So you asked, so I set that up, and then you asked, well, what happens next? Well, it's a process. Um, the first thing is we have to go through mediation, and then once the mediation is done, it's a non-binding process. Then the civil case can proceed. Uh, the defendants have 28 days to respond. Then you go through discovery, depositions over an extended period of time. So the fast track that you're going to hear our case in court is 18 months, and it could be as long as 5 years. So this is
Mm.
why it's totally against the idea of getting justice through the court system, but we're doing this to expose evil.
Yeah.
So, people are contacting us to get on the airwaves, which that's the biggie. We want to get on the airwaves to use the case to expose evil.
Mm. Well, God forbid it doesn't happen to anybody else in the
Exactly.
meantime.
Well, that's exactly right. That's
Mm.
the goal is, I don't want other people to lose their best buddy.
Mm. Well, thanks very much, Scott, for bringing us up to date on that.
You're
I'll
welcome.
put this out on the on the podcast and the live stream next week,
All
and
right.
I'll put a link back into our previous episode so people can go back and
So
get the full story.
that's fantastic, Tim. What I want to leave people with then is, if you want to follow the case, which I'd encourage you to do, we'll be posting the complaint because that'll allow other people to literally see the process we're going to go through. So if you have an opportunity to file, you can see how we're doing it. And then more importantly, we're thinking that Grace's case, as it takes off, we'll be able to use it as an opportunity to fundraise for other cases. So what we're asking people to do is sign up for legal updates. We created a separate website just for that, graceschara.com. And Schara is spelled Schara. So if you put in your name and email address, then we're sending out legal updates, and then you'll be in the loop as to what's happening to follow the case. This is truly the first of its kind, a landmark case, and we're hoping that you will take the time to go to that website. You'll see a quick story about Grace on there too if you want to. We did get the local news organization, the local Fox affiliate that covered the story. So we've got that link on that website. It's just, obviously they don't give you a lot of coverage, but they gave a couple minutes on the evening of the night of the news press conference. So I'd like you to listen to that and then, of course, sign up. So thanks for having me, Tim, and happy Easter to everybody.
And same to you. Thank you very much, Scott, for sharing. And yeah, I'll push it out as much as I can.
All right. I appreciate it.
Boom. I'm back in the room. I'll put a couple of links there to the last show that I did with Scott. If you want to have a look at that, if you go into the show notes for today, you will see the links for the shows that we did before, and you'll also get the links for the court case. And if you register onto that site, you'll get all the updates of what's progressing. Scott, I mean, he's such a brave guy, really is. I mean, it's tough enough living through losing a parent. It's even worse living through losing a child, and to lose a child through negligence is just, it's horrible. Anyway, that said, all the links are down in the description for today's show, and what I'm going to do now is going to bring on my next guest. Now, he's another brave guest, really is, and his story is something on similar lines. So, without too much further ado, let's bring in Charlie. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I love your intro.
Yeah, thanks. try and add a little bit of pizzazz to the show,
Yeah.
I know we cover very serious topics, but we like to make it easy, make it comfortable for people to listen to and to talk about.
100%.
So, Charlie, if you can give us an outline of who you are and your story, because I know it's quite a harrowing one. So the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Yeah. My name's Charlie Ray. I live out of Tampa, Florida. Just moved down here recently and just trying to help people overcome emotional traumas that kind of hold you back from moving to that next level. And I will describe in my story kind of this is my why and what I'm doing, but I was able to discover a way how to go in kind of to the subconscious mind and let go of that trauma that moves you to the next level. And I can do it as little as 10 minutes. So I've really mastered this. And it happened because of the fact of my 14-year-old son kind of gave me this ability and gift to be able to do what I'm doing. So back in 2010, I had a 14-year-old son, Christopher, and he was just going through a regular school year. But then he started telling his mom and I that he had some trouble sleeping. And so we brought him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician couldn't find anything wrong with him. So she thought he was mildly depressed and stuck him on Zoloft. And I still remember to this day him saying, I don't feel depressed. But if you go back to when he was an infant or a toddler, he was put on a prescription sleep medicine because he had trouble sleeping. So Christopher identified that I don't feel depressed, but they put him on Zoloft. And if you look at the side effects of Zoloft, it can make you suicidal. Well, later on in the school year, we started noticing that Christopher was wearing a lot of long sleeve shirts. And we had to sit there one day and actually force up his sleeve. And he had cut marks on both sides of his arms. And so as a father, I didn't know how to help my son. I didn't know why he was doing this. And so we brought him to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist looked at him, spoke to Christopher. He spoke to his mom and I, and he's like, yeah, your son's depressed and we're going to increase the medication. Well, about 2 weeks after the increase, we left Christopher home with his sister, Michaela, who was 9, and Gigi was about 2 or 3 years old at the time. And I remember going out getting some food, and we get this call from Michaela. and she's frantic on the phone, and she's like, Christopher's not responding to me. He's not moving. I think he's playing a joke. And I literally, my heart just sunk. I knew something was wrong. So we raced home. I went through every stop sign, every stoplight. And I remember pulling into the driveway, and I got out. And I remember that smell of the burning brakes. It's like forever etched in my mind. And the garage door's opening, and we run into the house. We run down to the basement. And in the laundry room, Christopher had hung himself. And so we had to grab him. We had to bring him down. We had to start CPR. He was taken over to one hospital. And then they flew him via helicopter to the local children's hospital. He was on life support for about 3 days. There was nothing that we could do to save his life. And so I'm starting this grieving process to figure out, like, I was just in shock the whole time. It literally felt like I was floating out of my body, and this wasn't real. Like it was a complete dream or nightmare that was going on. And I remember sitting at the funeral, and I was so upset with myself because I couldn't cry for my son. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Well, I was in shock the whole time. And I didn't even realize it. And it took me several weeks to just really sink in what was going on. Well, about 8 months after my son passed away, I get a call from my mom. And my mom called me, and she's crying. I'm like, what's wrong? She goes, Terry died. That was my brother-in-law at the age of 40, had a massive heart attack and died in his sleep. And so we had to bury him. And about 4 months after Terry had passed away, I get a call from my mom. Your dad's got cancer. About 4 months after the diagnosis, my dad passed away. Now, my mom was having all these bleeding issues. She wouldn't go to the doctor. So I convinced the on-call nurse to go and talk to her to get her to go in. And so she goes in, comes into the hospital, or we bring her in, come into the hospital, do all the tests. And after, I remember 2 doctors sitting outside the room, and they come walking in, and they said, you have cancer. And I just broke down crying. I just could not believe this. And so my mom died about 4 months after that. And then about a month after that, I ended up getting divorced. I was sitting in my parents' house because, we're closing the estate. We're trying to sell everything off and take care of that situation. And I was getting a divorce. I'm sitting in the house, and I was drinking, and I was like, I don't want to live anymore. And I made a comment on Facebook, and the police were at my door, and they brought me to the mental health facility. And I was just so broken. But then I started to build myself back up. I started to take these little steps, and I realized I wanted to do something where I can make an immediate impact in somebody's life without years and years of therapy, without having to take medication. And so over the course of these 13 some years since Christopher's death, I've been able to discover a way. I've worked with over 5,000 individuals and helping them overcome depression, anxiety, PTSD, fears, phobias, no matter what it is. I found a really gift to be able to do that with people, and very quickly. So that's kind of my gift, what I'm trying to give out to the world and help people overcome these emotional traumas that are holding you back in life. And that's kind of my story now, what I've developed.
Well, you've really been through the mill on that. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, life sometimes just throw these real curveballs at you, and it takes a lot of courage to deal with it. I mean, losing a child, I mean, I just can't imagine what that must feel like, and particularly in that way where they've taken their own life, and especially since it's come down to some sort of negligence on the medical side. How would you go about dealing with something like that to start with?
I remember pretty quickly we got into grief therapy. And so between us and the kids, every single week we were involved with something in regards to the grief therapy. And so that really helped us to kind of settle it in. And we actually did it over the course of 3 years, just because of the fact that we just kept having all of these deaths in our life. And so that grieving and grieving properly is just a really big impact that you need to deal with it. We did try to start a lawsuit and go after Zoloft, but they have a black box warning label that nobody under the age of 18 should be taking the medication. And apparently then we also try to go after the doctor, but the doctors are so protected that no law firm would take on the case. Kind of like what the other gentleman was saying in the last call or the last episode when he was talking about like he had to self-fund it because nobody wanted to do it.
I mean, it's tragic. And I guess how soon did they start the bereavement counselling?
We went to one. Yeah, we went to one that was pretty quick. We went in there. We started within maybe a week or two after Christopher passed away. And I remember the guy, and he was amazing at what he did. And it was a group session, and he was asking people, how long has the death been and things like that. And we told him it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he just was shocked because he's like, I cannot believe you guys are here right now. Like, this is so soon. But we didn't know what else to do. Like, we needed help. We had kids and we needed to grieve. And every one of us had PTSD. I remember after Christopher had passed away, I was afraid of the dark, and I was afraid of being home alone at night without another adult there. My younger daughter, Gigi, was afraid. She was 3. She was petrified of sirens for a long time because the whole entire street was filled with law enforcement and ambulance, and there was a lot of people there, and she was afraid of sirens for a long time.
I mean, I think that in itself was a good thing. The military devised a thing called TRIM, which is Trauma Incident Management, and it basically means going in after a traumatic incident, predominantly on operations, but it could be for anything. It could be for a car crash. It could be something like you've been through. And you go in 3 days after it and you assess who needs what sort of help at that time. And then you go back in the 30-day point, and you go back in the 3-month point. And it's one of the things is it's not unusual to have the sort of feelings, lack of sleep, lack of eating, and all sorts of emotions. But by doing that, catching it at a very early stage and looking at how you progress over the few weeks and a couple of months, it can normalise the emotions to give you a better understanding of what you've been through. And I think you as a family going through that bereavement counselling at that time would have probably helped some way to not normalise it, but to help with your grieving process, to help with your recovery from what's happened. I understand you never 100%. Ever get over it, but you come to terms with it, and you're able to move forward. And I think that's one of the key aspects with trauma and that sort of thing is to get the help early on, and it saves a lot of problems further down the line. But to have sort of three deaths in the family in fairly quick succession is pretty tough to deal with at the best times for any family.
Yeah, 100%. The grieving really helped. Being able to talk it through, being with other people in a group setting, so that other people, so it does help to process it better because other people are going through grief, which you're all going through grief. But the thing is, though, is it's helping you focus on realizing that you're sharing that with other people, that you're not the only one going through it. I'm going through my own grief. Other people are going through their own grief, but to be able to share it with other people and help kind of build that bond, it really did help break down that grieving process for sure.
And I think that shared experience as well, to know that although you've lost somebody, life does go on for those that's left behind. And it's quite easy to fall into the mindset of you just don't want to live, you don't want to carry on, but you have to for the person that's gone, for their sake, to carry on your life. Because I generally believe that anybody that's gone wants you to carry on with your life to the best you can.
Yeah, it kind of took a long time to realize that whole situation because I was in a very low place and I just didn't take care of myself. I had my own trauma that I was dealing with from my own childhood, which a lot of us can empathize and realize that happens. But to put all of this other things on top of it and get through that, and then all of a sudden it's like I almost had this strong pull and this urge. I knew I wanted to do something to kind of like honor my son, and I was able to just really switch my mindset around. Is that I just really gave all in to figuring out a way how to make an impact in people's lives, right? Serving other people, making an impact in their lives. And because of that, I would not be where I was today. So I kind of had to normalize. We talked about the word normalizing. I had to take that situation with Christopher and what happened to him, and I had to look at it as that was his gift to me because it ignited so much passion in my life for serving and helping people. And I've developed a way that's so easy for me to do it. For me, it's easy to help somebody and help them quickly. For other people, like, oh my gosh, I've been dealing with this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and I don't know how to deal with it. But to me, I've been able to connect, and it wouldn't have happened because that's the gift that Christopher gave me. And that's how I had to internalize this. I have to live on to provide and just serve as much as I can to make an impact all over this world as much as I can just to honor my son.
How'd you go about that?
So it took a while. And then I went to a Tony Robbins event and I came back from it. I was feeling really, really good, but I realized the trauma from childhood was still there. And so as the years developed, I realized that I could take a certain technique. I took that technique, I empowered it even more, and I realized I went back to that very first moment where all of it began. So I also tell this story is I call it the ungrateful little shit story. When I was younger, my mom would have a cleanup party and she'd bring all of us kids down to the basement to clean up. And I was about 7 years old. And so we're cleaning up, we're putting all the stuff away, and I don't know how to clean up. She's trying to explain it. I remember her getting so frustrated and so mad and so angry. And she'd start calling us ungrateful little shits. Well, this doesn't happen once. It would happen over and over and over again. And as an adult, I think that's hilarious that it impacted me as much as it did. But as a younger child, and you hear it repetitively over and over and over again, it affected me. And I realized that I started having codependency issues. I was seeking love because I didn't feel like I was loved. So I was able to identify, I call them the 4 fears. I don't feel like I'm loved. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I'm significant, or I don't feel like I'm connected. And so if you take anything in your life and kind of look at which category does that fit into and what was the earliest memory it started, and once we can identify it, I'm able to come in and utilize the technique that I've helped develop and expand upon, and then go in there and really just let go of the trauma. So it's instant. The feeling of lightness and just feeling like things are better happens immediately. And then once you can let go from that childhood trauma and let go of where that all started, and it may not even be childhood, but once you can find the earliest memory and let it go, your life starts to improve and you can start improving your life. But to start at a point where you're doing mindset work and different types of things before you go back to the original moment and let go of that trauma, it's not going to work as well.
So it's actually identifying the initial cause
Yes.
of your trauma to be able to deal with it. And I can see where that'll work. I mean, lots and lots and lots of people have trauma in their childhood that they carry with them for most of their lives. In fact, nearly all of their lives, because they don't know how to deal with it. And I think that's a really good way of looking at and dealing with it is to go back right to the start from where the initial event that set you on that path of not being able to work with it, not being able to cope with it. I think that's a terrific way of doing it.
Yeah,
It's the first time I've heard that.
yeah, if you look at like let me just draw this picture once. So we talk a lot about neuroplasticity, right? Like we talk about neuroplasticity. So we go back and we look at like this is a positive neural connection, right? It's positive. But if we go back to this trauma point right here and we go back and we follow it down here, it's negative. So what happens, even though, and I call this an emotional trauma, right? It's an emotional trauma because it's not like you're maybe like I didn't have PTSD from my mom calling me ungrateful little shit, but it caused that positive mechanism, that positive neural connection of feeling loved to feeling like I was not loved. So that original point where that happened at 7 years old, it was traumatized by negative. So it came off and it was a negative neural connection. So when you build off that negative neural connection, that's every time you want to feel love or give love, that negative connection comes off of there and it's traumatized. So like, I don't know how to feel love. I don't know what a healthy relationship is. I'm seeking love. So I'd be in a relationship and they'd start yelling at me because I witnessed my mom and dad fighting a lot and they'd yell at each other. So how did I handle relationships? How did I handle an issue? I would yell and I would fight because that was being programmed into me at a young age and understanding like, this is normal for me. I'm going to yell and fight and scream because that's how you communicate. So that's where that neural connection comes off of there and it's damaged. So what I do is I go in and I take that and we make it positive again. We lessen the feeling, the emotional feeling around that neural connection and strengthen it to be more of a positive neural connection. So when a situation like that comes up, you won't feel anxious. You'll feel calmer. You'll know how to handle the situation better because you're able to repair that and start empowering yourself with new, different techniques that'll help you to communicate with somebody else better.
So I guess that happens to so many kids growing up where the parents don't get on, they're at each other's throats, and they end up splitting. And that has a real detrimental effect on a huge amount of kids. The amount of kids that particularly nowadays, that are single parented. And that's all because the marriage has broken down. Now, coming on to marriages breaking down, lots of people that have been in your sort of situation, there's a massive, massive negative or really difficult to be able to cope with as a couple, particularly if you have children as well. How did you as a family able to cope with all of that? And it's a difficult question. Are you still together? Have you come through it as a family?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The statistics on a couple staying together after a child from suicide, the divorce rate goes up to like 85%, I think it is. It's a very large number. But since of that childhood trauma, when you look at that, I was in an unhealthy relationship just because of the fact I did not know how to be healthy with myself. And as an adult and as knowing what I'm knowing around the subconscious mind and how that works, if we look at situations with like, let's say my parents. So let's go back to and I found out some of this not too long ago, but my mom, her brother was shot down and killed in World War II. He was a bomber pilot. So imagine how my mom's life changed from her mom and dad moving forward. that was impacted in a negative way too. And I look back and I just found out from my sister, from my dad, I guess my dad was living on his own at the age of 16 and still going to high school. And now that she said that, I remember, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. My dad really never talked much about his childhood. He told me more stories about when he was in Korea as a Navy operator, but I didn't know much about my dad's childhood. So if you look at those connections, you got mom, you got dad, you got this, you're bringing two people together with trauma already. And if you don't know how to heal that trauma, if you don't know how to fix it, what happens? That situation does not know how to communicate, and it's pushed down to the kids because I don't know how to deal with it. So I want to come in and be able to end this generational trauma and let it go. And I can do it for one person or I can do it for 10,000 people. It doesn't matter. I don't even need to know what your trauma is. I bring you through that procedure I bring you through, and that life starts to improve. Relationship communication can start to improve. And that's the power of it. That's the real power of the subconscious mind.
So that's how it's done. Is it? It's just being able to talk it through and take it right back to where it all began, to be able to make a positive out of negative.
Yeah, there's some association with the event and some disassociation with the event. So you kind of go into the event, you let go of the emotions, you empower the event with a new empowering belief, and then we lock that in your subconscious mind. So by the time you're done and you kind of open your eyes again, you're like, you feel different, you feel lighter, and it's instant. In a matter of as little as 10 minutes, you can start feeling a difference. You don't have to live your life with all this pain that your childhood or an earlier event caused in your life. You can let it go and truly live the life that you want to live instead of having all these regrets of, man, I wonder how good my life could have been if I would have just fixed this problem. You don't have to live your life that way anymore. You can fix it now and then build whatever life you want to build.
That sounds awesome. And I think so many people that can benefit by just doing that.
Yes.
So do you actually teach people this, or have you learned it from someone else?
No, well, I've learned certain modalities, and then I created my own to improve upon it and make it even better. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to bring somebody in one of my courses. They're able to take my course, whether it's online or whether they want to do more of the personal coaching, the one-on-one coaching, because it really depends. And there's so many different areas of your life. Like you have your personal life, your physical life, your emotional life, your spiritual life, your finances. I remember growing up with my dad saying money doesn't grow on trees. How often have we heard about money, money, money? And your mindset around finance and money is so destroyed. And money could be so abundant, but it's going back and it's healing that. I remember a specific story around time. I remember I always used to be early for everything. I'm not late anymore, but I used to be really early. Because when I was younger, my dad would sit in the car. All of us kids would be in the car waiting to go to church. And he'd be yelling at my mom to hurry up because we're going to be late to church. And we heard that over and over and over again until it got to a point where I went to one of my daughter's plays. It was an hour early. They had to open the doors for me and we had to wait that long. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This needs to be fixed because there is no way we have to be there that early for handling a situation like that. And so it's even stuff like that. And it's not.
Yeah. So your dad was clearly military then, and they obviously come from
Yep.
a similar background to sort of the 5 minutes before the 5 minutes before. And it just extends out. So you're on parade sort of 2 hours before you actually need to be, and that's the way that the military have done it for centuries. I mean, it's always there, sort of an hour before you're supposed to be, and I can see where that came from.
100%. Yeah.
So Scott, how do people? Not Scott. Scott was the early guy. Charlie. So how can people get hold of you if they want to have a chat?
Yeah, so I have a free 20-minute call with anyone if they want to book on my calendar. I have a calendar on my website. It's www.charlie, CHARLIE, charlieraythehealer.com. So you can go on there. Down below, if you go all the way down to the bottom of it, you can click on the calendar, and I've got 20-minute spots available if somebody wants to really understand more and discuss a little bit about where they are in life and where they would like to go. I can definitely jump on my calendar, book a call.
Terrific. Well, I think you've imparted a huge amount of information there. And I think we can, people watching this will be able to pick up and hopefully being able to identify their initial trauma that they can then turn a negative
Yes.
into a positive.
Yeah. 100%.
So, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. So let's just move on. If you want to hang about, we'll have a quick chat after and take it from there. Wow. Hopefully you've managed to take something from this evening, whether it's from Scott and to sign up to get the updates on how he's taking his case forward for Grace, or from Charlie. And you want to contact Charlie, the contact details will be down in the description. So until next week, when we've got the live awesome quiz on Tuesday, it's all about Walk on the Wild side this next week. So get your wild heads on. And obviously next week, again, everyday conversations regarding mental health, and I'll have more guests on next week. And don't forget, Sundays at 6 a.m. British summertime, I have a podcast goes out. It's also on YouTube, so you can get both. So until next week, TTFN, ta-ta for now.